Hello and welcome to XYZ Live. Which one is this now, Dave? I can't actually remember. I wrote it down somewhere.
About 316.
316th XYZ Live. No, it's 13th. Lucky 13. It's the lucky 13th XYZ live stream. We started a bit late today.
Bum, bum.
Oh, well, it happens. It is what it is. So, yeah, we're a little bit late today, which is a little bit annoying, but we just had a few technical issues, as you sometimes do with the technology. But, yeah, we have a lot to talk about today, so I hope you got your listening pants on, as well as your questions and all that kind of thing. But we're going to be talking about a number of issues, as the title suggested. We'll be talking about, Starbucks, what happened around there. Count Dankula just got sentenced today, so we'll be talking about that issue. Greens weed legalization, Israel Folau, whole lot of issues. So I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, we'll just start off now with the Starbucks issue. So
Yep.
in case you weren't up to speed, so what happened is a couple of guys were in Starbucks. They sat down. They didn't order anything. They asked to use the bathroom. The staff said no, that's for customers only. They stayed there for a while. I believe that the manager asked them to leave a couple of times. They refused to leave. They said they were waiting for a friend. But as is the custom with a private business, an actual private business where you're going in there and you're buying stuff, you're supposed to buy stuff. They asked them to leave. They didn't leave. So rather than just let them stay, they called the police. The police came down and ejected them. And I actually heard the police call where the manager actually referred to these two men as gentlemen. So not those black people in there, not not these N-words. I'm not going to label a person that word, unfortunately, for some of the people who like to be more politically correct than I am. But yeah, so she wasn't being offensive. She wasn't being aggressive. She was being quite polite. She asked for the police to come and eject them. The police then came down and they then continued to refuse to leave after the police asked them to leave. So they were politely asked to leave several times, and then the police just arrested them and took them to the police station where they were held for a little while until Starbucks didn't press charges, so they let them go. Fast forward to a little bit after that, and we've got this massive Starbucks are racist, Starbucks hate black people, this, that. And it becomes this massive national furor and making international headlines as well, because the world is so globalized these days. But for me, I think Stefan Molyneux mentioned it in his video about it, that it's really a kind of an intelligence test, and it's kind of a test as to whether you understand how the free market works and how private business works and all that kind of thing. So I thought it was quite funny seeing the usual lefty outcry about more racism and all that kind of stuff. And now Starbucks has come out and said they're going to close like 8,000 stores for unconscious bias training, something which is complete load of turd, doesn't work. They've basically they're flagellating themselves like old priests, saying, oh, woe is us, we're so bad, woe is us, we're so bad, we're so racist, we're the worst people in history. I think it's great because Starbucks are one of the most left-wing corporations in America and in the world, so to watch them getting hoisted by their own petard is actually quite grand. It's really funny to see it happen. Anyway, so what do you guys think about that one?
It's proof that there's absolutely nothing you can do to protect yourself from the fury of the SJW mob. Absolutely nothing. Like as you said, like Starbucks, of any corporation to get hassled by the SJWs, Starbucks would be the last. Like they're always out there for all the progressive causes. So it is beautiful. One of the things that I love is that there was an article in The Guardian, I think, what's his name? Sargon of Akkad was linking to it. He's talking about how there was an article in the Guardian complaining that they were getting implicit racism training when they should have been getting training for explicit racism. There is nothing you can do to say this. It's what we always say, never apologize.
Always double down.
Always escalate. Like they've apologized, and so now that's not enough, and they're going to demand even more.
Exactly. It's like you give them an inch, they'll just keep taking and taking and taking. And then did you see there was that other guy who's come in, that was that comedian, the black guy who's just sick of this stuff. Has gone in
and said, hey, racism, give me a free coffee.
What's my reparations coffee? He asked for a reparations coffee and filmed it all, and then he was on went on Fox News. He said that, oh, you know what? I think I'll be able to get on the news if I do this.
Did he get reparations coffee?
He got a reparations coffee.
Good. I'm going to try that out.
You should go.
Be asking for tea.
Asking for tea, yeah, tea and spices.
Oh no, that's cultural appropriation. I can't do that. Oh, wait, it's my own culture. Oh wait, no, I'll do it. No problem.
Yeah.
They won't know what to do. They're like, should I serve them? I don't know. You know.
You should ask for your imperialism coffee. It's like
colonialism, whatever you call it. No.
It's so funny watching them basically eat their own. It's fantastic.
It is. But look, I mean, the issue with these sorts of cases is it's always a he said, she said, isn't it? Look, it's entirely possible in theory for them to have, genuinely been racist to these people and then get on the phone, call them gentlemen, and try to brush it under the table. There's no way of proving otherwise, right? But the problem when people make these sorts of complaints, and they resort to the race card right away without any actual evidence to back it up, without having gone through actual discrimination, is that when people do get discriminated against, when a store genuinely does kick two people out because they happen to be black or whatever, they are less likely to be believed because people will say, oh, this is a publicity stunt. This is a way to get attention. So really, these sorts of cases, they hurt people who are going through actual discrimination. They actually create those sorts of issues. Because if a private business is entitled to kick people out for any reason, and I think you have to accept that if you are a true libertarian, then someone is absolutely right to raise that as an issue and to complain about the business. But you should never make things up about people. You should never assume there's a discrimination element if there isn't one. So I guess I want to know, how long were they actually in the coffee place? And
they were in for a while. I don't know exactly how long. I think they would have been in for like 10 to 20 minutes or whatever it was. So not a huge amount of time, but long enough for the manager to realize that they weren't buying anything and ask them to buy something. And here's the thing, they said that they were waiting for a friend. So I think one of them asked for the bathroom and they wouldn't give them the bathroom key because they're not paying customers. And, if you give everyone access to the bathroom, then that pushes costs up because you have to spend more to clean and da-da-da-da-da.
Yep.
That being said, I mean, I quite regularly go into places like McDonald's and KFC and use their bathrooms just without paying because, you know what, I figured I've paid plenty to them over the years and they're open anyway. And the thing is, I'll often go in there and I'll buy something. I'll go to the toilet and I'll be like, you know what, I'll just go and get myself a wrap or something because it's lunchtime. But it's like they were in there for about 10 to 20 minutes. They refused to buy anything. All they needed to do was just buy a coffee, like one coffee or one stick of chewing gum or just one thing, and they would have let them stay there. They refused to buy anything. And then when asked to leave by the police, so not the manager already asked them to leave and politely, and then they called the police and the police asked them to leave politely, and then they sat there arguing with the police for another 20 minutes. And they still refuse to leave. It's like, by the time the police have got there, isn't it sort of a good idea to just leave? Like, I mean, why are you making things more difficult than they need to be? But that being said, like you said, it's like people just jump on this and, this is discrimination. And when the bad things actually happen, then people just tend to be a little bit more skeptical about that. And also, I mean, actual discrimination, like actual issues like that, are quite rare in the Western world. There's actual proper bad stuff happening around the world, and these people are sort of worried about two blokes getting kicked out of a private business. I mean, it's like, talk about the epitome of first world problems. Like, there's so few problems in the first world that we have to literally create problems to whine about. It kind of annoys me, but it's still funny watching Starbucks eat itself.
I think it's when we consider this in terms of the overall strategy of Marxism and cultural Marxism, to me it makes a lot of sense. Like whether you're talking about like in Starbucks, like I know it was a troll, but like the whole reparations business, and just even the way that like the SJWs have jumped on Starbucks and they're just making them dance. That could be like you sort of see cultural Marxism working there on a bit of a micro level on how these men, they say that they were treated and the demands that they're making in response. And then you look at somewhere like South Africa, where it's working in a macro level, where they're actually making moves to make it legal to take land of white South African farmers. In both cases, the same argument is being used and the same goal is being used. In both cases, the argument is being made that you have taken something that is ours. You have done something to us that means that you owe us. And the goal is basically to take what we have in both cases. It's extortion in both cases.
Yeah, it's just classic Marxism. So, yeah. I mean, it's funny because I've been reading a lot about cultural Marxism lately, and do you know on Wikipedia they call cultural Marxism a conspiracy theory.
Oh yes, yes.
And now here's the thing: I'd never heard this before. I was just doing research for a video I'm probably going to do in 20 minutes for some stupid reason, but in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that sort of time frame. So I'm going to do a video responding to someone's argument about cultural Marxism where they sort of say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. Da, 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 da. Okay, look, what they're saying is, oh, well, the conspiracy theory is that there's some sort of concerted effort to infiltrate the culture with Marxism, and it's like coordinated and that kind of thing. And see, I never really viewed it that way. Like, I view cultural Marxism as the rules of Marxism, as in oppressor versus oppressed, apply to everyday culture. So you sort of said that South Africa was cultural Marxism. I wouldn't call that cultural Marxism.
Well, it's classic as well.
I just call that Marxism, like just pure Marxism.
I actually do think cultural Marxism, you can basically say it's classical Marxism applied to culture.
Yeah, that's how I always defined it. So it's funny when people sort of call cultural Marxism a conspiracy theory, because it's like you're just using a different definition. I think it's kind of like. Yeah.
Also, we actually have like documents, like we have the textbooks of Marxists talking about cultural Marxism and explaining what it is from 20 years ago. And now that everybody knows what it is, they're trying to pretend that it doesn't exist because it worked so well.
What's interesting is the left always, they jump on anyone who uses a phrase like cultural Marxism for saying, oh, this is a dog whistle phrase. You're just throwing it out there to attack us. You're making this up. When they use a lot of genuinely made up phrases, which are completely, convoluted, trickle down economics, a perfect example. No right-wing person, no economist who isn't a complete shithead has ever used the phrase trickle down economics. The only people who use that phrase are butthurt socialists who don't actually understand economics, how it works. Right. On one hand, I mean, if you dumb things down so much that you create this term, you're able to effectively brush aside actual evidence. So, for example, in Ireland, they lowered down their taxes, and as a result of that, companies flocked to their country, established their offices, hired people. This is proven fact. This isn't theory, right? But all they do is they jump in, they say, oh, what is trickle-down economics? And suddenly they make up this bullshit. I think the issue with cultural Marxism is when people hear that term, they sometimes think we're talking about some coordinated conspiracy of people on encrypted phone calls trying to bring down the West or whatever. I don't think it works that way. I think, like you guys mentioned before, it's really certain ideas which proliferate in our culture and, act in a sort of franchise model. Anyone can pick up these ideas and run with them. And you make a massive issue out of something that doesn't exist and get their 5 seconds of fame. And it's like you said, it's the oppressor versus oppressed thing. Turn someone you want to attack into an oppressor, and suddenly everyone's on your side, or people on the left are on your side. What's interesting is I've had conversations with actual Marxists, people who genuinely embrace the theories of Karl Marx, and many of them say this whole recent social justice agenda, creating identities, creating this fake identity politics thing out of using queer people, using black people, using all these marginalized groups to create a fake narrative is actually really harming Marxism. which is meant to be about creating identities based on class. They're meant to be bringing together working class people who are black and white and brown and gay or whatever. But they're creating more divisions, and it really is the left eating itself up alive. Meanwhile, a capitalist company like Starbucks, because they are capitalists, they're doing all this crap because they genuinely think it'll make them a profit. Doesn't know what to do because they didn't come into this actually believing the philosophy of Marxism. They came into this thinking, you know what, if we keep appeasing, doing what we think minorities want, then we'll have all these customers in New York and California.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is it's all backfiring completely.
And that's the thing. This is why the strategy of never apologize, always double down needs to be permeated through the culture everywhere. Because if Starbucks knew that was how you deal with these people, I agree with you in the sense that, yeah, you're right about they don't actually believe the crap when they talk about, oh, this unconscious bias. They're doing it because they want to virtue signal and make more money. They want people to say, oh, look how great Starbucks are, let's go and buy there. But they don't understand that that's not how it works. Just because these people are making a really big noise doesn't mean it doesn't mean they're the ones that's the idea that people are going to resonate with. They're just the loud ones making the most noise. So the thing is, imagine if this big racism row had come out and they just turned around and said, you know what? They weren't in the store to buy anything. We asked them to leave politely. The police asked them to leave. They still didn't leave. It's not racism. We don't, if you can be black, brown, white, green, blue, pink, it doesn't matter. We want your business. Come to Starbucks. We want your business. We kicked them out because they weren't buying anything. If they just said that and not apologized, imagine how they get respect. That people would turn around and be like, yeah, it's a private business. Shut up, piss off. And it would be done. It would have been done. We wouldn't have even heard about it. But because they backed off and they cowed and they submitted to the lynch mob, the SJW lynch mob, it just made the situation even worse for them. It's like now they're closing 8,000 stores for a day for no reason. They're spending a ton of money. Do you know, here's another story which I heard about. Now, I haven't actually read any articles. I only heard about it through another YouTuber. Dick's Sporting Goods in America, after the Parkland, because of all this GUN, we can't let the algorithm hear us say the bad word because of that debate, the GUN control debate. This Dick's Sporting Goods went out and literally destroyed millions of dollars worth of AR-15s. Like they didn't sell them back to the manufacturer. They didn't donate them to the army. They didn't sell them at a discounted price and give the money to the victims of shootings. They literally destroyed them.
You know what this is?
Like, how dumb is that? This is the dumbest thing I could have heard.
This is literally, I don't like rape, I'm going to chop off my dick.
That's exactly
where's the bloody logic, man?
Logic.
That is actually kind of happening.
Yeah,
it's becoming state mandated in Victorian schools.
Effectively, I mean, we can talk about that one a little bit later. But okay,
so join the army. Join the army. You can be paid to do it.
We'll move on from that topic. And
the army, we're going to pay for your sex change operation, but if you want to tattoo a skull and crossbones on yourself, you can't do that. That's against army discipline.
We'll be talking about that one in the XYZ live stream in the next couple of days. We'll hopefully be getting a former soldier who wrote an article about that on XYZ to come on. Hopefully, if not, it'll just be me and Dave ranting up. Yeah, we'll just talk amongst ourselves.
We can rant. Can I go back to the cultural Marxism thing?
You want to talk about cultural? You want to talk about cultural Marxism a little bit more, do you? Because I'd really like to. I'd really like to.
Let's move on.
We can talk about cultural Marxism again.
Technically, it leads into a whole list of the topics we're looking to today.
That's exactly right. I mean, we can go down that.
We don't want it to go for 8 hours. So
we can go down that.
We could go on all day. Yeah.
We can talk about it on Wednesday. Dave and I we can talk about that with the other guy because it is a really big topic. We could actually set an entire topic on it, entire live stream on it because it is such a big.
We've already done 2.
I know. It's just That's the thing. It's just so big. But anyway, I want to move on.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, viewers, about the rant. We just had 3 people talking over each other for a second there. So hopefully you got a little bit out of that. The next topic I want to talk about is one that everyone on the internet is discussing, and even it's getting discussed in other areas. Although I don't know how many normies know about this issue in Australia, and that's Count Dankula, who was just. The result came in. The guy was convicted, and he got an £800 fine. And he got an £800 fine. And when I saw that, I was just wondering, well, if the UK is so hard up for cash, why didn't they just ask people nicely for it? I'm sure someone would have given them something if they were that desperate for cash. But I mean, Dave, didn't you wanted to say something about that as well, didn't you?
It's about 2 hours for a lawyer, isn't it? It barely costs a day. That'll get you to lunchtime.
I hope it was worth it. I
£800.
hope it was worth turning the United Kingdom into a joke. £800.
I guess
that's the price of turning an entire nation into a laughing stock.
Look, the UK is the home of the TV license. You need a license to watch TV. If you carry on a knife or some scissors, the police will not only arrest you and charge you, they will, confiscate the knife and scissors, take a photograph, put on their Facebook page saying, "Look at these dangerous weapons." They're not even joking; they're completely self-unaware. The UK is a complete joke, and it's getting really horrible. This is just part of a long pattern of horrible cases over there. I remember there was another one where a business hired 2 drivers, and this was a business that delivered a bunch of products, including alcohol. And they hired 2 drivers who were Muslim, and it was all there in the job description. You might need to deliver alcohol or any other product, and then these 2 guys were asked to deliver bottles of beer to a certain place, and they said, "I can't do it. It's against my religion." And the boss said, "I'm sorry, you can't refuse. I'm going to have to let you go." And they sued for discrimination. And the court actually said, based on the European Union Charter of Rights, that the boss had a duty to give them a different task to do if one was available. I mean, it's just, can you believe this horrible rubbish?
The silly thing about that is, if you're a business owner and you see that, are you ever going to hire a Muslim employee? And like you said before it's about the discrimination with the guys in Starbucks. You're cutting your nose off to spite your face. Why, if you know that you're serving alcohol, or what about pork? Like I've seen videos of Muslim boys. It was a bloke. It was a young guy in KFC get upset that someone ordered pork on their burger, like bacon on their burger. So why would you hire them if there's even a small risk? And then then there's the requirements to do their daily prayers and all this and all that kind of thing. And it's like, am I really going to take the risk on this individual? I mean, when it's already a big enough risk to hire people, especially in Australia. I don't know what IR laws are like in America, in the UK, but in Australia, it's already, it's hard enough to fire people as it is.
Yep.
Are you going to really take a risk on someone who might turn around and start making demands of you for their religion and get upset when you tell them to get upset and make complaints when you tell them that they can't have it? So it's, I think it's really silly, and then ultimately it feeds back on itself, and you end up having these ghettos because no one will hire them anyway. They're all on welfare, and they just become hotbeds of terrorism. So I think it's really important to call that kind of thing out, and it's really important to say, you know what, if you don't want to serve alcohol, don't apply for a job where you have to serve alcohol. It's like, this is a no-brainer. If you do that, then that's your problem. And they need to be shamed for that. And it's important that the institutions understand this. But right now we're sort of in a situation where the politics hasn't quite caught up. The politics is way behind the culture. I mean, politics is downstream from culture, but right now it's way downstream from culture. Like, the culture's there, the culture's permeating, but the politicians haven't quite got the memo yet. I think in Australia, they're getting it a lot quicker than in other countries, though. I really do think they are getting it a lot quicker in other countries. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, well, here's the thing, like, I keep talking about, like, you see Sky News in America, in the UK, which is just as far left as it gets. But then you see Sky News in Australia, which is quite libertarian conservative, like that sort of realm. And it's, you know, here they're doing a lot better. But I think that's a big reason why the politicians are sort of getting the memo a little bit quicker here. But at the same time, we still have to deal with Tits Shorten and Sally McMahon.
What's interesting is if you look at actual Islamic countries now, most of these countries are dry countries. You're not legally allowed to drink, but they have certain, you know, they have certain rules. So if you're a foreigner, you're allowed to have some for personal use. You can have some delivered to your house. And if an employee, and most of these employees are Muslim, in one of these actual Islamic countries, told his boss, look, you want me to deliver alcohol to this white man, I'm not going to do it. You know what his boss would do? Beat the shit out of him and fire him right there. And no one in that country would say, you know, the boss was in the wrong because the employee is not doing his job that he's paid to do, right? So, you know, it's like most of the Muslims I know would look at that case and say, why the hell were they doing that job? But the issue is the exception becomes the rule. You know, the more crazier and the more, you know, more of a, you know, piece of shit that you can be, the more chance you have to come up in the media as being, I'm a member of this community, I'm a representative, you know, tar everyone under the same brush that I tar myself with. And it really is this issue where the very worst people in certain groups are making partnerships with the social justice left or whoever's taking up their cause by passing these laws. And that's what's creating this big problem. And all the normal people in between, no matter what religion they are, no matter, you know, where they come from, are disgusted by these things. But we can't do anything about it because these are the cases that actually make the news. And, you know, I think we need to change the attitudes before we can change the law. We need to come to this point where we do that.
Well, like you mentioned one thing there that I want to touch on, and that's they make the news. Now, I can tell you as someone who dealt with future media insiders and current/past media insiders, the news is about as left-wing as it gets. Even the so-called conservatives aren't. Like, this is the mainstream news. I mentioned Sky News before. Sky News has moved in the right direction, but the mainstream, like, you know, ABC, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10, these mainstream news channels in Australia are extremely left-wing.
It's ironic because they make the argument that we need the ABC to counter the right-wing corporate press. But, like, yeah, Channel 7, Channel 9, especially Channel 10, they're about as far left as you can get.
Exactly. And I don't understand that argument. Well, I do understand that argument, as you mentioned, when you look at it from a cultural Marxist standpoint or even an economic Marxist standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because they're essentially stealing the money of their political opponents to propagandize to the people who they can win votes from. They're stealing our money to push propaganda that we completely disagree with. So from the Marxist standpoint, it does make a lot of sense as a strategy. It's actually kind of a good strategy for them if you think about it. Like, they're essentially getting something for nothing. The problem is, like, we really shouldn't be accepting that kind of abuse because it is abusive, really, when you think about it. The fact that they are taking our money against our will and using it for propaganda purposes is pretty sick. Like, did you see that that thing in that video? I didn't get to make it. It was on Facebook, the ABC video. They actually took the page down about talking about white privilege.
ABC Me, yeah, the kids.
ABC Me. I saw Sargon of Akkad. Sargon of Akkad made 3 videos on it on his Thinkery channel.
Oh, good on him.
And they were hilarious because it was probably the most cancerous thing I've ever seen from the ABC. And I mean,
did the ABC refer to Sargon of Akkad as a Russian internet troll in response?
I think they did. I think they dog whistled him they dog whistled to him. He mentioned that they did sort of mention that.
A far right troll.
Far right troll.
White supremacist Nazi. Probably
all the real Nazis hate him.
Yep.
Yeah. And so Gary just mentioned that KCJ was shocked by how bad Sunrise and the Project were. And yeah, they are horrendous. They are absolutely shockingly bad and shockingly PC.
The thing about morning television in Australia, it's overtly feminized, and the men who are on there are basically they're just the biggest cucks you'll ever see. And it's basically you watch it, it's amazing. Like, the women, they even have the same inflections in their voices. in the way that they give the news and in the way that they talk to each other. It's hilarious to watch.
And you know what? The funniest thing is I can hear it in women in my everyday life, like not people that I know, not every woman either. Other like Neeks the pig's in the chat, so she kind of does this as well because she's a pig. But she, she. No, that's Clementine Ford.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
We gotta get that one right. But yeah, like you hear it and you can hear the tone, and I can spot the tone a mile away, and you just get that gut wrenching, like, oh, I don't like this person. I don't like this person. Just from the tone, and then they start talking and saying things, and you're like, I knew I didn't like you. You know,
I find that if you get that nose piercing, I find that's usually a good sign that they're probably not worth talking to. You know, just I don't judge people when I see them, but every single time it's someone with that nose piercing, they open their mouth and just shit flowing out. Sorry, I need another 10 beers before I talk to you, and I'm able to survive the conversation.
So we're got a nose piercing. Where did your owner go, and how did you escape the field, you cow? Have you got a brand on your butt? Like that's what the tattoos are. They're just ownership brands.
Oh god, like the tramp stamp with the butterfly. Oh my god,
they're the purple-haired bovine.
Adam Piggott actually put it very well. He said that tattoos on women are actually a public service because they actually because like studies have actually been done that show that women who get tattoos actually have lower impulse control. So like having a tattoo is actually saying, hey, just watch that chick. Just
I think you could apply the same thing to men too. I mean, tattoos, so I don't think it through.
I got a tattoo.
I see it.
That's one of my tattoos. I got 2 on my back as well. But it's true. I lack impulse control. So science confirmed.
Stop it. Stop.
I mean, since we're talking about the media and the left bias, I actually have this theory. I actually think you've got 2 layers in the media, right? You've got your executives who actually run the companies, and you've got your presenters, the face of the company, sitting, the project and so on. And I think while the presenters might be these super left-wing, ultra-progressively people who don't reflect the mainstream, what people actually believe in, your actual executives are really right-wing, self-interested, and cynical people, right? Now, here's some evidence. So look at someone who's one of my least favorite people in the media, Yasmin Abdel Majid, right?
Yeah.
Now she's a complete oxygen thief, adds nothing of value to any conversation, and just talks absolute shit, but no motive other than to incense people, right? And she's sitting all the way in London. She's not even here. And even now she makes the headlines consistently, time and time again, for something stupid she said. And you read all the comments on Facebook, it's all angry, all upset. No one is taking her seriously. And yet she keeps getting the press. And then you look, which outlets are actually writing about it? Which outlets are still publishing her tweets as front page news? Daily Telegraph, Daily Mail, all these outlets which are meant to be traditionally more right-leaning. XYZ, exactly. And what it just goes to show you is they know this pisses people off. They know people who actually like this crap. But it grabs eyeballs, it grabs listeners. Everyone, it's like watching a train wreck where everyone's coming out of the train on fire and burning to death in front of you. It's horrible, but you just can't look away because it's like, oh my god, this has my attention.
You make a good point. You do make a good point, but like there's one thing that I would sort of question that theory in a certain area, and in terms of the Sunrise shows. But you make a good point because me and Dave were talking about this before. Now there's a few like YouTube is very, very, we'll call it right wing, we'll call it pro-liberty, pro-individual. We'll say right wing because it's easier to say, but I mean, there's a broad difference between.
We won the internet on YouTube.
We won the internet. Like the YouTube is like the intellectual space on YouTube is, it's not intellectual. It's not the same. It's not like a leftist sphere where it's all everyone agrees, but there's a general theme. Now, there's a few new left-wing YouTubers that have done really, really well because the market is, I think there are leftists who are craving YouTube content that get like good YouTube content that sort of backs up their beliefs. So there is a market for that sort of thing. And I was saying today that it's actually not a bad thing because you don't want an intellectual bubble. You don't want people to be in their own little in their space without being questioned, and it's like the old saying of every government needs a strong opposition. So it's like you have that strong opposition, and so you sort of raise that point with Yasmin Abdel. It's like they put her out because she's that opposition for people to bounce off and like, oh, we don't like that, da 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 da, and it sells papers and all that kind of thing. Where I don't think it applies to shows like The Sunrise and shows like The Project and all that kind of thing is these shows are put up and they're presented by all these like hardened leftists, and Dave, like you said, just very feminized men, and the women are all feminists. And here's the thing, people will respond to people will respond emotionally to someone like Yasmin saying something idiotic, but they won't sit down and genuinely listen to what she's saying what am I trying to say? They won't actually respect her opinion enough to listen to her for an extended period of time, especially not over a series and years and years and years, as a lot of these hosts have, like The Project and Sunrise, like, all those kind of people. So while, yeah, it's a decent theory, I still think maybe these cynical, because you're probably not wrong about the high-level producers. And when I was at uni, the highest producer...
It seems like you're saying that basically, like, shows like The Project, they set the agenda. They set the agenda of what we all talk about, of what's okay to say, what's not okay to say. And ultimately, they set the agenda of, like, national policy as well, because, like, they're part of the culture, and politics is downstream from culture. Someone like Yasmin Abdul, like Australia's fattest Muslim, like she's a clown, and she serves her purpose, but she doesn't set the agenda in the way that The Project does. Like,
yeah, she doesn't do that. You're right, and that's
everybody gets pissed off by Walid Ali. On the right gets pissed off by him, but all the lefties sort of go. The lefties actually listen to him. The lefties actually respect his opinion, and they're the ones who are actually watching Channel 10. Like, I can't see Channel 10 going, let's allocate an hour a day to Walid Ali because that way we can get headlines and people will hate him, and then we can sell papers tomorrow. Like, I don't see that. I can see places like the Daily Mail, they love people like Yasmin Abdel talking about, and like, even Sky News, they'd be like, yes, this person says something stupid, let's just rag on it for a while. And because that brings in the viewers on that side.
Look, I'm not saying it's all entirely shock. I mean, with Yasmin, it certainly is entirely shock. But if you're a media executive, and you could be completely right-wing in your personal views, but you know that this panel show with these, as you said, feminized men and people parroting these, left-leaning opinions, if you thought that would make your company a bit of money, then being a right-wing person, you would naturally be self-interested.
Definitely.
And you would be more likely to jump on that. Whereas if you're a left-wing person who genuinely believes in social organization and all this other stuff, then you're more likely to go, oh, well, you know what? That's not what I want to do for a living. That's very cynical. I'm going to go to a channel that actually represents what I think. And so they end up working at the ABC, maybe, perhaps.
I agree that it's the motivation. The motivation behind the higher ups is going to be almost entirely profit. But it's like you said with the Starbucks thing, they're not pushing this leftist nonsense because they believe in it. They're pushing it because they think it makes money. But they're wrong. It doesn't make the money. It doesn't endear people. It doesn't endear viewers to the shows. And the only reason they've done so well for so long is because there's no other option. Well, there is another option now. It's called the internet. And there's a reason viewers are flocking away from TV and coming for genuine political commentary on the internet. It's not so much an Australian thing just yet. Like, I don't think that many Australians are getting their political commentary online because there isn't that many people doing it in Australia, to be fair. I mean, there's me and there's a handful of people that no one's really heard about. But as as people sort of wake up and realize that this content is available online, they're slowly going to come over. People have already gone over to Netflix. People are getting a lot of their entertainment on YouTube. Kids love YouTube because parents will just stick kids on their iPad and go watch kids shows on YouTube, and they'll just sit there for hours just like, oh, look, this guy's playing with Nerf guns. Oh, they're playing Roblox. Oh, they're playing games and talking about it. I mean, so kids are really, really into YouTube, but Australian parents aren't really as much into it. It's a lot bigger in America. In America, the media is basically they're they're the tree, and they were like this, and now they've been cut at the roots, and they're sort of slowly going like that. It's only a matter of time until they crash and run out of money because the corporations realize that there aren't enough viewers, or the viewers all die off because, I think CNN's average audience is like 60, 70 years old or something ridiculous. Whereas I know my average viewer, like the average person age of someone watching my content is about 30, and I've got the biggest range is for between, I think, 24 to 45. Like this is my audience, and this is the general audience of most people on YouTube. So I think the executives at these media companies have got it completely wrong. They make a lot more money if they actually tapped into the culture a little bit better and started talking about issues that people actually care about. And people don't like feminism. Like, people don't like this cultural Marxist rubbish. People think it's stupid. People are sick of political correctness. People are really, really sick of it. So if they started tapping into that feeling of annoyance, they'd probably get a lot more respect, and they'd probably do a lot better. So
it's interesting. Well, what's interesting then is, like, we've made some really good cases for why the media basically pushing left-wing views is not economically viable. Like, it's not a good idea. Like, we've really made that case pretty strongly. Then this kind of reinforces the idea that, like, the elites and the people in charge of the media really are sort of globalists who don't actually care about the fate of the nations. They don't care about ordinary people. They're separated from the rest of us, and they really have their own agenda. Like, that sort of reinforces that idea. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I was watching a video by George Soros, actually, because I'm trying to understand where he's coming from. Because here you have a guy who's worth $10-15 billion, and rather than saving up all that money and relishing it, he spends the vast majority of it pushing an ideological cause, which is manifestly out of step with what most people on the ground, as you said, actually believe in. And I think what it is with these people, they make so much money that they get to the point where getting some material happiness out of it no longer gives them any happiness. It's like when you smoke all day for the rest of your life, you don't feel anything when you smoke anymore. The only way they can feel anything is if they feel like they're exerting control over other people and making what they think their ideal world is start to happen. And, the ordinary person on the ground and what they think can be damned because, I'm this rich, powerful guy. I know better. I know what's good for you. In 3 generations, you'll be loving me. And I think that's what it really comes down to. And if you're that kind of person, what is your instinct for changing the world? Is it going to be, it might well be. There are a few multi-billionaires who are, pro-liberty. There's the Koch brothers, I think. They fund a lot of pro-liberty causes, but they're an exception. The majority of these guys, the people like your Soros and so on, tend to be soft, left-wing, progressive. Even Bill Gates leans in that direction. Because they realize that, by building these relationships with other elites in government circles and so on, they can enact a vision for the future by using governments as a means of control, either softly or hardly. And so, the ones who have influence on media corporations use it. The ones who, have, the presidents of countries on speed dial. I think Richard Branson as the president of Nigeria on speed dial. I remember hearing about that a while ago. They stop caring about political ideology, and they care about what they want to turn society into. And for some of these people, that vision is a left-wing, left-leaning society where everyone is, I guess, a bit more homogenous, and even in terms of their views, endorse what this billionaire seems to believe in. So what we're seeing is people's egos on a massive worldwide scale, cloaked under the guise of, I'm altruistic, I'm here to help you. And, if you're a little, fellow on the ground, a farmer in, the rural part of Australia or somewhere else, and you're concerned and worried that things are changing rapidly and you don't like the ideas being thrown out, who cares? You're such a small blip on their radar. You don't matter to them.
If I could summarize what you've just argued, in the same way that Marxism, whenever it's been applied to countries, has basically brought about a new aristocracy, cultural Marxism has reinforced a new aristocracy in the modern world.
Well, what it's done is it's created a new way for people to exert their influence without putting their face on everything, right? So you're watching a TV show and you're not thinking, oh, well, this is a George Soros show because his face is nowhere to be seen. He's never mentioned. Chances are the presenters don't even know who the guy is. And yet, behind the scenes, they're pushing ideas which came out of a think tank or came out of an activist group, like Get Up, for example, which is funded by, George Soros. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. Like, we know that Open Societies Foundation funds Get Up and funds a bunch of these other sort of thought centers for left-wing ideas. And then it flows out of the mouth of a Walid Ali, 1 month later, a few weeks later. And it's a form of it's not control, it's soft control, it's influence. So it's completely above board. But it happens at such a massive, wide-ranging scale that we're now seeing a massive tension between what people actually think and the stuff they're having shoved down their throats every day.
I think this is a big reason that the establishment want to censor the internet as well, because you're right, like guys like George Soros, they obviously want to influence the world in their own way, and I would imagine no one thinks they're the bad guy. Well, very, very few people do anyway. So he probably thinks he's doing good, even though he's an evil bastard. The thing is, because of the internet, one guy with a webcam can influence millions of people. You don't need billions of dollars anymore to influence people. All you need is a webcam and the ability to speak clearly, and people will resonate with that. And that's the thing. And then when one guy can do that, imagine what happens when you have 10,000 people with webcams, and then add in editing software and the ability to meme and humor, and it just explodes that influence. It ends up being worth way more than anything that money can buy, because one thing adds on to the other thing, adds on to the other, and the only answer that they really seem to have is, we got to stop these people from talking. But it doesn't work like that. You can't stop people from talking. Once the cat's out of the bag, it's out. Like, the ideas are out there. You silence one person for their ideas, then all that's going to do is send people like, why is that person getting silenced? It's the old Streisand effect. So censorship doesn't work. The only thing that would possibly work, unless they're willing to go full draconian and like full North Korea, which I'm sure some of them would like to do, but let's assume that's impossible on a wide scale. So unless they're willing to do that, the only answer that they have is to actually have better ideas argued in a better way. Like, this is the only thing that they've got. And since they've controlled the cultural paradigm for so long, it's like, conservatives have had to battle uphill for so long, and their ideas have been debated. Like, there's always been the lone conservative on the panel of three leftists, like, balanced Q&A, where you've got one guy of the right, one guy who's center left, and then two people who are far left and a left-wing presenter. You have this for decades, and it really strengthens the ability to articulate ideas. And it's like that muscle over and over and over again, getting worked and worked and worked and worked for decades. So they might have the dominance in the culture now, but the people coming up behind them, it's like in chimpanzee society, where you've got the dominant chimp, and then all of a sudden you've got two chimps coming up who have been bullied by the dominant chimp for 2 years, and it's like, you know what? We're strong enough to get him. We're going to get him now. And this is the kind of system. This is the situation. We're in that power struggle at the moment. So I can't. I still am very optimistic for freedom on the internet. Maybe not necessarily on YouTube, because I think they're sort of running around flailing, having no idea what to do. Hopefully they stop their censorship soon, but who knows? But even if YouTube continue to censor, then they'll kill their platform and people will go elsewhere. But so this is why I have a long-term optimism for freedom on the internet and for freedom of speech and all that kind of thing. But yeah, in the short term, there's probably going to be a lot of battles to fight and a lot of debates to be had. In order to
the culture war that we're in, it's going to determine the course of human history. Like the days that we're seeing now, like it's absolutely pivotal.
Oh yeah, it's extremely important that everyone does everything that they can to influence the culture in the most positive way possible. Which is what the thing is. This is why guys like Jordan Peterson are so important and have done so much good, because there's one, like I said, there's one guy who has literally influenced probably the entire world in one way or another. Just one person, because he's influenced millions of people, and those millions of people have probably told 10 people each So that, and there, that's 10 million people telling 10 people who then tell more, another 10 people. That's everyone in the world, pretty much.
That's a lot of clean rooms.
It's a lot of clean rooms. My room's still filthy, by the way. So I don't know about that advice.
Well, but the thing with Jordan Peterson is he really is a creation of the left, right? Because he's not someone who gained his media presence simply by virtue of what he's saying and how he says it. He gained his platform because he stood up to something which is common sense for most people. Why should I be forced to use they, them pronouns, which are made up and completely new? Never in human history has this been a thing. He simply asked one easy question, and he was attacked so severely and harshly for it that even people on the political fence who weren't particularly right-wing saw what happened to him and woke up and said, what the hell is going on? Is this a symptom of something bigger? And that's how it began, because his actual messages, which he delivers very well, and he's a great lecturer, he's got some great ideas, but they're not new ideas. They're fairly simple, straightforward ideas. I had a conversation with a Christian friend of mine who, we were talking about this beautiful, few-minute-long clip from one of his lectures. It's on YouTube. It's sort of going viral, where he talks about deriving happiness from life, even if things don't go well. Learning to experience goodness from life, not dependent on everything going perfectly. And he said this is literally just one of the books in the Bible. I think Ecclesiastes, just dumbed down and condensed into very simple form. It's nothing remarkable. It's nothing great, and it's not. But what Peterson does is he takes these timeless messages that have been in our culture and in cultures around the world for so long, and he brings it to us, and he lets us know, what, there are some things that are universally correct. There are some things that are universally good. Not everything needs to be dismantled and critiqued and torn into pieces to suit someone's arbitrary narrative. And I think that's really the value that he brings to the table and why his message resonates with so many people.
Yeah. Well, yes. Those key stories of our culture have been completely undermined by cultural Marxism. Like the whole point of cultural Marxism is to subvert everything. Like they're so insane that they think that they can subvert fairy tales. But here's Jordan Peterson coming along and saying, look, these stories, they actually have meaning. They have deep meaning, like primal meaning. And when he speaks, like I've talked about it before, it's like my body actually changes temperature because he has a way of speaking about things that resonate with something really, really deep inside of you. And he reinforces those things that cultural Marxism has just been undermining for decades.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it's totally right about the Jordan Peterson, like the stories you mentioned. Yeah, he takes these really timeless stories and he calls them meta stories. And what I love about him is the way that he explains the meta story behind these stories and why they resonate with people. And when and it all comes down to basically our biology and the way we evolved and the way we look at the world as human beings. And it's very symbolic to the way, it's symbolic to our own experience and our own history as human beings. And it's kind of like you look at the Bible and this is the story of human existence right here. And this is why, this is why you don't take the Bible literally. Like you don't look at the words, oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. That's not how you look at it. You look at it as the way an English teacher looks at Shakespeare, only the Bible is describing the human condition. And that's the way he does it, and he explains it so well. And I wanted to point out that, you're totally right that the left are the ones who created him. By attacking him, they created the Streisand effect. And the same thing happened with this topic started with Count Dankula. So it's a good way to tie it back in there, and that Count Dankula is also a creation of the totalitarianism of England and the UK. He would never be anywhere near as famous as he is now if they hadn't charged him with a hate crime. I mean, that's the funniest thing about it. Like, they tried to charge him with a hate crime. He became massively famous, and then he got fined £800, and he's probably not going to have to pay a cent because everyone's going to pay him the £800 anyway.
There's going to be a crowdfund for him.
There's already a GoFundMe, apparently.
He'll make a profit from this.
Yeah, he probably will. Imagine that. Imagine if he made like thousands of dollars profit. It's like,
I'm thinking
charge me with a hate crime more often, boys. Yeah. But actually, I wanted to.
We should all go subscribe to his YouTube channel. Give him ongoing support that will continue well after this case is done and dusted.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to. There's plenty of topics we could have talked about. I wanted to really quickly let's talk about we'll briefly talk about Israel Folau because it sort of ties into the never not doubling, never apologize, don't double down.
Yeah.
Never apologize, always double down. So for the people who don't know, Israel Folau is a rugby player who recently he was asked on Instagram what he thought the God had in store for gays, and Israel Folau replied, "Hell unless they repent." Just paraphrasing there, and the absolute shitstorm that came out of that, it was off the charts because obviously you can't be saying that about about the gay lobby, and he's a famous person who said it, and it just blew up. And even Qantas came out and said, "Oh, Qantas, the airline that partnered with Etihad, who are based in Dubai, came out and attacked him for his position on gays." I mean, hypocritical much. You
Sorry, you've killed me, Matty. You've killed me. I never made that. Never made that connection. It's
amazing. Like, this is how ridiculous this is. But here's the thing: it's this moralizing from corporations to turn around and with the Starbucks as well. It's demoralizing and attacking people for their opinions. And it's like, I think it's really. I sent Qantas a complaint. Everyone should complain to them and tell them it is not acceptable for corporations to attack the freedom of speech of people by threatening to pull sponsorships because they have opinions that you don't like. That is not an acceptable reason to pull a sponsorship. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself, Qantas. That's unreal. That is so bad. But Israel Folau has turned around and just said, "You know what? I don't care. I'm standing." He basically said he was going to stand by his beliefs, and if Rugby Australia didn't want him to play for Rugby Australia, he'd just take up offers that he's had from the UK and I think Japan as well. So, I mean, he's just shows you the strategy when dealing with a left-wing lynch mob or any kind of outrage mob, left-wing, or even if it was like puritanical religious one from the conservative side, any kind of outrage mob, you never, ever, ever apologize. Always double down. Always throw it straight back in their face.
There's two things I want to say about that case.
Yeah.
The first is about, I guess, the sort of cultural implication, and secondly about Qantas itself. So look, I do think that a private company should, for any reason, be able to withdraw sponsorship or funding. If they do feel that they don't want to sponsor a team where one of the players has that view on gay people, then that's fine. That's their decision. I don't like it. I don't think that's good enough reason to pull sponsorship, but that's what they do. The second thing is, I think we need to seriously look at Qantas and look at how much of a safe position they have because the government and the rules work in their favor. What this has done is it puts them in such a position that even if people want to say, you know what, I don't like this crap, I'm not going to fly Qantas, it's very difficult for us to make that decision because often they have the cheapest flights, they have the flights running at the times we need them to run, they have control over certain routes. I mean, we're sort of stuck, aren't we? I think if the whole rationale...
Can I butt in? Does that undermine your previous statement, like saying, they're a private company, but in effect, they're a private company that's there because of the government lets them be? Like, does that sort of undermine that argument a bit?
It doesn't, because if the private company is in that position just because the government let them be, then the simple argument is they can continue to exist and do what they want, but just get rid of whatever artificial advantage they have that isn't created by themselves.
Okay,
so if the whole rationale of, let's keep Qantas as at least 50% owned by Australians, I think there's a rule. But if the whole rationale of that rule, for example, is it's a matter of national pride for us to have a national airline, this is no longer an airline that is a source of pride for most Australians. Most Australians are really angry about what they're doing, not just with that, that's a small blip. The politically correct language, you're not allowed to call, passengers he or she, lecturing your staff about what language they can use. Meanwhile, guess what the top lounge is called? It's called the Chairman's Lounge. So the rule only applies to the staff on the ground and to the customer. It doesn't apply to your actual CEO.
Again, this comes down to culture. Like a great, like sort of on a similar sort of topic. Recently in the Rugby World Cup, I think it was the Fijians who did really, really well. I think they made it all the way to the semi-final. And like there were these magnificent scenes of them like celebrating, like they would. after a match, they would all be celebrating by singing these church songs, and they have like the beautiful harmonies are magnificent. And at the end of one of these matches, the Aussie team, it might have even been the final, the Aussie team came in and like joined their big circle and sort of sang the song with them. And it was amazing to watch because like all the Fijians, like they were getting into it, they were loving it, and they were genuinely singing about God. And all the Aussie guys are kind of looking at each other like this, going, hang on, we're like singing about God. It was just, the irony was just, it killed me. It was kind of horrible. I'm like, guys, you've lost your culture. Like it's like what Jordan Peterson is talking about. They're completely disconnected from their culture. So much so that like it takes outsiders to come along and sort of reinforce their own culture. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is what we used to be like 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think people are waking up. So I just wanted to just mention one thing. Like you sort of said, yeah, the Qantas, it's their money. They have the right to do what they want. I actually agree with, I agree with you there. They do have the right to pull sponsorship if they choose to, because it is their money. However, we also have the right to call them out for being dickheads for doing so. This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted to do. Yeah, so this is my point. Like, I think we should just be calling them out right away. But yeah, it's interesting, Dave, what you mentioned. Because I wasn't in that, I wasn't there, so I don't understand. I can't fully empathize with that situation, but it does make sense because I know that growing up as a young man in our culture, I really felt disconnected. I felt like there wasn't really like that people weren't really speaking to me. But then I went out and I sought out the thing. It's interesting with Jordan Peterson and all that kind of thing, where the things he's saying, he's the most articulate and he's the most interesting, and he's the way able to condense these old stories down to very, very simple. I wouldn't say soundbite, because like he does these really long lectures, but it's like he does these long lectures with great soundbites, which is fantastic. It's an amazing talent. But the thing is, the ideas he's talking about, they weren't new to me when I heard them from him. It was just that he articulated them in a way that really resonated with me, and I can see why other people are really resonating as well. But like the idea of, you know, you're a man, you should find your purpose, you should do this. This has actually started out, and this has actually come about because of the internet, I believe. Like mainly because of the internet, where people are spreading all these ideas around, and so I sought them out personally. But what's great about Jordan Peterson is that his ideas are being spread around the world, and people don't really have to seek them out. They might just fall into them. So that's the great thing about what he's doing. People might accidentally come along at something that he's taught, or one of his lectures, or one of their friends might just be talking about it openly, and they might get into it. Whereas what, you know, sort of 15 years ago, when I started getting into, you know, trying to discover how to actually become a man and living a meaningful life, I had to actually go and search for it on the internet, and I had to go through, you know, this information and that information, and I had to read this book, and I had to read that book, and I had to listen to this person speak, and it took and there's a lot of conflicting information there. But where Jordan Peterson is great, he's great at condensing it down to like the core like what does it actually mean. And to bring it back to what you're saying, a lot of it comes down to the core beliefs of Christianity and what the ideas of what Christianity speaks, and that's, you know, individualism, love yourself as you love your neighbor, tell the truth, live a meaningful life, love your family, and all that kind of thing. So I think it's great that these ideas are coming out. I think over the next 10 years, this is why I'm optimistic. I think over the next 10 years, especially as the generation, like as my generation sort of gets older and, you know, gets into their midlife, you know, into their 40s, and the teenagers now sort of get into their 20s, it's really going to start becoming the dominant culture. But it's got to take time. And this is what you just keep talking and talking and talking about it, and that'll just help, you know, if everyone talks about it a little bit, then that just helps it move on. But I think, yeah, over the sort of the next 10 years, it is going to become the dominant culture. But we sort of need to learn from the mistakes of the left in order to keep it that way for a long time.
Interestingly, like Adam Pickett talks a lot about how he had to learn a lot of his lessons just the hard way. Like he learned it by observation, just by observing like real men and seeing how they interacted and seeing what they did and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so then like over the last 15 years or so, like we've had all these sort of pockets of the internet, and I've had a similar experience. I've been sort of red pilled on one issue after another. The idea of like one place or just a couple of key people who can basically be truth nukes, just to really just open everything up just to people like bang, just like that, just like the red pill, like Neo takes the red pill. That would be pretty cool.
They say that Generation Z, so the people born after 2000 and going forward, are going to be the most conservative generation in many, many decades. And I think that's true because, you know, back in the day, if you were, you know, super sexually promiscuous or propagating the most shocking ideas possible or doing things to get a reaction out of people, that's how you got your name out there. That's how you were a mad rebel. And now suddenly that's become the norm. That's become the norm to the point where those sorts of ideas are now in the bloody school curriculum, in things like safe schools and such. So suddenly to be a rebel means to tone back from that. You know, it's like it literally becomes the way that you stand out and define yourself. And it becomes distasteful to push all these shocking and extreme views. And we end up having a society that moves a little bit back towards the way it used to be because we have a bit of a nostalgia for a time we haven't had the chance to actually live through. Well, my generation didn't. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that manifests itself.
How old are you, Sacha?
25.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're, yeah.
It's as Paul Joseph Watson states in his video, conservatism is the new counterculture. It's the new punk rock. So it's cool to be Christian again, which is really weird. Even if you're not exactly a Christian, like it's still cool to have the same kind of attitudes of conservatism. Of like, you know what? I don't want to go out and sleep with 50 million people before I get married. I don't want to live on a cock carousel until I'm 30 and then try and find some beta male to pay pay for me for the rest of my life. I think, also it's important that we encourage the younger people to stick out like this, like to stand out. Don't worry about what the dominant culture is saying. It's okay. Like, there are people who agree with you. And I actually get comments on my channel all the time. I was like, I can't believe there are actually people in Australia who think like this. I thought I was the only one. I literally got a comment like that the other day. It's amazing.
Yeah. We get that all the time.
Yeah.
I refer to it as lone wolf conservatives. We're often like the one person, like where the people who our friends refer to us as, oh, he's our liberal friend, or he's our conservative friend, and we just tolerate him. Oh, but he's a nice guy, you know what I mean? And so, like, the whole situation that you often find yourself in it makes you crazy because you think, well, I must be the only person who thinks like this. When I present my views to people, like, I just get blank stares and they don't even understand what I'm talking about. So it's actually a really cathartic experience, and it's been that way for quite a few of the contributors to XYZ. They've said that writing the articles for the XYZ, it's just getting it all out there, and it just helps them make sense. It's almost like a diary when you read what they present.
Yeah, I agree, and that's sort of how I see it as well. That's how I see the YouTube channel and the articles that I write for the XYZ. For me, it's a way of getting my ideas out there. Like, I want to put my ideas out into the public. I want them because, like you said, the internet's forever. So I want to put them out there, and whatever happens, but at least it's out there. So at least when I'm, hopefully I've had a long life and I've got a heap of grandkids and I'm old and crusty, I can look back at my life and say, I did all of that. That's my body of work right there. And again, the fact that I've ever since going to the XYZ, it's been great to be able to interact with people who are not exactly like-minded, but still on the same path, like on a similar road, and who, being like-minded, saying like-minded, I don't like that term because it's not like we are like-minded, but we are.
We're anything but.
Sorry? Yeah, that's it. It's like we agree with each other on a lot of things, but unlike when you go into a leftist circle, in the XYZ circle, often if you say things that people disagree with, then you're still going to get a debate there. Certain people accepted will those who shall not be named, I guess, who sort of I think they sort of decided to just or what would you call? They sort of just I wouldn't call it. It's not astroturfings with ads, but they carpet bomb the place with trolley memes and 300 comments on every thread with the exact same thing, and it's like, oh goodness me, just the spam alt-right spam bots. And I mean, I'm not alt-right, and it was kind of annoying.
I think a few of them are actual deep state agents.
Maybe. Someone actually asked in the question in the comments. I'd love to see Matty's thoughts on GUN control. Really good question, and I'll answer it really quickly. I agree with the Second Amendment of the United States, and I think Australia should have a Second Amendment of the United States because our Australian government took our guns away, and we are literally no safer. In fact, I'd say we're less safe given the amount of crime that's happening and the amount of violent crime. I'd say we're significantly less safe as a result of gun control. There is no correlation between murder and firearm ownership, and there is a correlation between disarming people and mass genocide. So I'd say gun control, I'm firmly on the side of the Second Amendment in America. And I know it's a lofty goal for me to have, but I would love to, if I can look back on my life when I'm 80 years old and say that I got a Second Amendment constitution, that would be one of my superficial life goals. I mean, I've got the other life goals that are actually meaningful, but that would be certainly a feather in my cap if I was able to do that. It's a pretty lofty goal though, considering the culture right now.
Yeah,
but
I don't think that's
never say never though, mate. One person at a time. We convince one person at a time, and we change the culture one mind at a time. And because we have the facts on our side, then it is certainly possible. But yeah, the emotion on the issue certainly makes it quite difficult because people hear guns, guns. Let's not look at guns because this is Australia. Port Arthur massacre. Something I want to talk. I might do a video about that. I'm not going to ruin it for you. I'll talk about it with you off air, David. But guns. Here's the thing: guns don't kill people. People kill people. I know it's a total cliche, but it's true that it's a true statement to say that no gun in the living in history has ever killed a single person. Not one gun has ever got up off the table and said, I don't like that person, I'm going to shoot them on my own, because guns are inanimate objects. You know what killed us? One of the biggest massacres that we've had, one of the biggest terrorist attacks, or two of the biggest terrorist attacks that we've had, one was 3,000 people were killed by planes taken over by people with box knives. I mean, there are people who think it was an inside job. Okay, maybe it was an inside job. They still didn't use guns to do it. Secondly,
maybe the British police should have taken their scissors.
Maybe they should have taken their scissors, or mini baseball bats. Actually, a mini baseball bat might have helped then. And the other one was the Nice attack, where 86 people were killed with a truck. So don't tell me that guns kill people when you can kill heaps more people with other things. And just last year, we had a bloke run down Burke Street Mall with a Commodore. He killed 5 people, including kids, with a Commodore. So please do not try and tell me that guns kill people, because guns do not kill people. Individual psychopaths kill people. That's the problem.
I'm going to, I guess, sort of play devil's advocate. I say sort of because this is not an anti-gun thing. This is more in terms of how you limit the thing in question being used in the wrong way. So many of the people who express support for the Parkland kids, for example, I find them to be sanctimonious. I don't like some of the things they say. But if the only reform that they want to push out of it is that there should be stronger controls on whether a mentally ill person gets the gun, or certain background checks that don't impose too much of a burden on ordinary people, I think that's something we should all be able to get behind, because there genuinely was an issue of that nature with some of the recent shootings.
Are you talking about the Florida shooting at the school?
I can't remember which one. There were like 3 or 4 shootings recently. At least one of them had that problem.
There was the one at the school where there were warning signs about this guy who did the massacre. There were warning signs about him for years, and people, there were so many complaints to the police, and there were laws in place, and there were processes in place to deal with him, but nobody actually followed through with those processes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like the park that. We shouldn't. I don't want to talk about that too much because YouTube doesn't like people talking about that issue. So we shouldn't talk about this too much. But it's like that that wasn't a failure of gun policy. That was a failure of the FBI to take someone who they knew was a problem and knew was a risk. He was warned about. And then you've got the Orlando shooting where the guy, I think the guy's father was an FBI asset or a CIA asset or something like that. I think that came out recently. And what we have to remember, here's the thing, this is what they talk about. They look at the guns, but what the people never discuss or never seem to want to talk about, almost every single one of these shooters were on SSRI, so antidepressants, and or came from broken homes. So this is the correlation here. So we got, SSRI, antidepressants, and poor upbringing. So drugs and abuse. Like this is the issue here. It's not guns. Like it's not gun control per se. It's also the glorification of the fact that whenever something like this happens, it gets worldwide media attention, and it's sort of like that. It's disaster porn in a lot of way, and death porn, where people are going around and seeing these disasters. But again, like I said, there's no correlation between gun ownership and murder rate.
Well, you're right, but here's the thing: even if we accept everything you said, let's accept that. If even having all these red flags, if even having the mental illness, the broken home, all the symptoms being on antidepressants, even if we accept all that, if the person was still able to go in with those red flags and buy a gun, then it might be that this is one of the small things that could have stopped him and a long list of things that should have been done differently.
Okay.
But it's still there. Right?
I understand your point. I've got to say, just banning someone from having a gun or stopping someone from having a gun isn't going to stop them from going and killing a lot of people if they want to. Think the Nice attack.
It becomes a lot less efficient.
The Nice attacker killed 86 people with a truck. So that's pretty efficient if you ask me.
Especially, that's probably at the very, very top end of the scale. If you look at gun attacks, there have been like 150 people killed sometimes by a shooter. Anders Breivik on that island killed like nearly 200 kids, I think. We can compare the numbers and say a car can kill as many people as a gun can. But obviously, a gun is going to give you much better range and much more power than a knife would. You probably kill maybe 5 people if you're lucky before someone shoots you with a knife. And there's this crazy guy at Central Station in Sydney about a year ago, I think. The guy just pulled out a knife and started threatening people, and then he got shot to shit and sent to hell. If that guy had a gun, I think he would have killed at least 2 or 3 people who didn't end up dying that day. It's not about limiting the rights of ordinary people to get a gun. It's about finding smarter regulations.
Yeah. So the way that I would propose is a system that's what Israel use. So in Israel, pretty much everyone has the right to get a gun. In order to get a gun, you got to do certain courses. And then when you have that right to get a gun, you are expected to carry that gun at all times effectively. So in Israel, they don't have these mass shootings. They don't have they have stabbings, and obviously they have terrorist attacks because they're at war with the people around them. But it doesn't happen as often as you think, because when someone does start going mental, then there's pretty much 3-4 people with guns in the area to take them out immediately. So again, this is what a lot of the gun lobby in America say, and like the left sort of attack them and you just want more guns. But the answer is effectively more guns. So the more people with guns, the better. And again, you're not going to stop a psychopath from wanting to kill people. I get your point about efficiency and all that kind of thing, but again, if someone really wants to do a lot of damage, you can go out and make chlorine gas pretty easily. Like I don't know how to do it myself personally, and I would never want to do that kind of thing. But if you really wanted to commit mass carnage, you could do it. And I understand that, a gun you can just point and shoot, and it's a little bit simpler. But if you really put your mind to it, you could actually do a lot of damage. And again, I'll point it out again, there is no correlation between the number of people dying and the number of guns owned in each society, actually, other than a slight negative correlation. So when you say, well, how do we stop this thing and how do we stop that thing? It's like, what you're really saying, what it really, really means when someone makes that argument is, how do I stop hearing about disasters? So I understand that, you don't want these kind of tragedies to happen, and they are tragedies, but you've got to look at it. You got to look at it from the point of view of the truth. Like, what is the truth, and how are we going to act on that truth? And the truth is, there's no like. The truth is, less guns does not make you more safe. In fact, in a lot of ways, it makes you less safe. So this is what I'm concerned about. So yeah, I understand that you got mental cases and you can have these big shootings and but the solution isn't to just take guns away from people. The solution is to do something like what they do in Israel and encourage good law-abiding citizens to have their guns on them at all times. So if someone does start shooting up the place, they're not going to kill, instead of killing 50 people, they might only kill 2. So it's like that's the solution there. And I know that's not an ideal solution. In an ideal world, you want no one to get shot. But again, I mean, potentially you could put in controls of like, people have to, you could even make it so that people are over 25. I know that might not be when your brain's developed. I mean, that's unconstitutional in America. So I probably wouldn't agree with that in a lot of ways, but I could see an argument for it. Potentially, if you're on an SSR, you could say if you're on an SSRI, you can't have a gun. I mean, you could say that easily because that's then you just stop people from taking these disgusting pharmaceutical chemicals that are destroying their minds anyway. There are certain things that I'm sure you could do without infringing on people's rights and still reduce the damage.
What you're saying, what I'm saying, they overlap really, right? Look at Switzerland. They almost universal gun ownership. Everyone knows how to use a gun, mandatory military service, and they don't have these issues of gun crime. But like I said, it's not about the number of people owning guns or who owns guns. It's about, I think it is possible for most citizens to own guns and know how to use them, but also have certain things in place to prevent, like you said, the bad people from getting the gun. So like Israel, for example, that test that you gave that you have to go through before you can own a gun, that would, I believe, effectively route out a large number of the people who end up acting in these shootings. Most of the people who get these guns and do the shootings in the US are not trained military people. I mean, some of them were, 1 or 2 cases. But they're mostly just people who the only way they could feel a sense of power is by getting that gun. So I think there's a room for a bit of both. I think in the US, at least, guns are so ingrained in their culture and who they are that, practically speaking, the best solution is for everyone to own a gun and know how to use it.
Yeah, I actually think that's the best solution across the board. I'm not against some sort of control and, to stop certain individuals that you might not want to have a gun from having them. But I think the challenge is getting that right, because you don't want to be taking away the rights of someone to own a firearm, because there's a chance there's a really small chance they might go mental one day, but there's a chance. So everyone's got a chance that they might go crazy one day. Trust me, I know. It's like there's a chance no matter what. So yeah, I think the challenge would be getting the balance right. I mean, and here's the thing: if that's the debate that we're having in Australia, then I've basically won my position, or the position I stated before. I've essentially won from where we are right now. Because so if we end up having that debate, I would consider that a massive win for self-defense rights in Australia, because the alternative is a lot worse. Like, the alternative is we go down the route where we're a disarmed populace and dealing with a tyrannical government. And if you don't think Australia's government can get tyrannical, then you're deluding yourself. Australia's government could most certainly get tyrannical. I mean, the UK's government is already tyrannical. They're like, it's a soft tyranny of tyranny of moral busybodies, but it's still a tyranny. So it doesn't take a lot for that tyranny to turn into a violent tyranny. So I think it's important that we do have this discussion and start fighting for our right to own a firearm, because self-defense is a God-given right, and that includes the right to own a firearm. But yeah, I take your point. I take your point in that we could have a test, because I don't understand. I haven't actually looked into Israel's full gun policy, so I'm not an expert on it. You seems like you know a little bit more about it than I do. But as far as from what I've heard from people who do know about it, it sounds like it would be sort of a good compromise for the Australian system. So rather than going the full American Second Amendment and anyone can own a gun no matter how mental, to something that's everyone has the right to own a gun, but you just have to pass a relatively medium-sized barrier in order to get one. And then when you get one, you're required to hold that gun. most of the time.
Well, we talk a lot about rights, but with every right, there's a responsibility that comes with it, and I think we need to
of course.
recognize that. And before we can talk about having a right to bear arms in Australia, the first thing is we need an actual Bill of Rights to begin with. We need to protect our freedom of speech. We need so many things that we should be doing to our constitution.
It's a great topic, actually. It's a really good topic, but I'd love to have this discussion another time. How about next time I bring you on, we'll discuss the Bill of Rights?
Sure, sounds good.
Let's do it.
It's a much big topic that I don't really want to get into just yet. There's a few things.
One quick example of an inefficient gun attack. A recent attack on YouTube by the vegan yoga instructor.
Fail.
We actually had some exclusive sources letting us know from some of the witnesses in YouTube. Apparently, some of the victims said to the vegan shooter, "Go ahead, you couldn't hit the side of a barn with that thing."
That's horrendous, David. That's her. I thought my dad jokes were bad. That's goodness.
Hundreds of people read that, Matty. It's got to be worth something.
Hundreds of people's days were ruined by that joke. All right, so I think we're getting on. We've had a good discussion so far, but maybe we can go. It's getting a little late, so maybe we could have one more topic. Any questions from chat? If you want to ask me questions, that was a good question on the gun control. Actually, that wasn't planned, but it had a good discussion. It's something that we need to talk about more in Australia as well, because I think I find that in Australia people are so afraid of this topic, and every time I bring it up, they're like, they get that defense because they've got their beliefs. It's that same old, I've got my beliefs and I don't want to have them challenged. It's all that kind of thing. So it makes it a bit difficult. But I think the challenge is just to engage with people on a factual basis and a reasonable basis, all that kind of thing. But it looks like I think people are sort of it is getting a bit late. So a few people have sort of cut off the chat. So it might actually be a good time to finish there. We didn't really get to go to all the topics that I wanted to, but we got on some topics that were actually excellent anyway. So who cares? So anyway, any last words from the two people today, including David Hiscox?
Yeah, Matty, I was just wondering, what happened to your Hawthorn hat? Where did it go?
Was there footy on this? Where's
it gone? There was this cancerous growth on top of your head last week. I don't know where it happened.
Sorry. I should mention something while you're giving me crap about Hawthorn's horrendous performance.
All right.
The legalization of weed. So Gary just asked about the legalization of weed. Sorry,
I did actually
I put that in the title. I actually completely forgot I put that into the title. So it's a very good point. We really should talk about something that I advertised that we were going to talk about. The Greens. I actually put a video up on BitChute about the Greens, about their proposal to legalise weed. So I am personally in favour of legalisation of pretty much all drugs. I wouldn't legalise ice because my reason for legalisation is that drugs don't actually the taking of drugs doesn't actually hurt anyone else. But as far as I can see, based on the evidence at hand, when people take ice, they do represent a threat to society. So that the taking of these drugs represents a threat to other people. So I would make that illegal. The thing is, I actually have a personal theory. I'd love to be able to test this out, that if we did legalize all drugs and we legalize things like heroin, a lot of these ice junkies would actually move over to things like heroin and smoke weed a lot more often. So I think if you could get heroin for $5 a gram, but ice was $100 a gram, you'd be a lot more likely to go for heroin.
Solution to ice, let's get everyone on heroin instead.
Well, it's not that I'd be giving everyone heroin. Here's the thing. It's because legalization doesn't work. The drug war doesn't work. So legalization, I think, is an imperfect solution to a problem that we can't solve by sweeping it under the rug and making it illegal. Yeah. And I personally would much rather have some junkie smacked out on their couch eating chips than going around beating people up because they're in an ice psychosis. So this is my, it's do you want smacked out junkie going and hurting people, or smacked out junkies falling asleep on the couch, but in killing themselves slowly. So this is my argument. This is what I'd say, because legalization is shown to be a better solution for things like marijuana, and I'm fully in favor of marijuana legalization. Yep. I'm still against the Greens, and I think the Greens are doing it for cynical reasons, so I don't trust their motives, but it is a proposal that I support nonetheless.
From a likelihood perspective, like when you consider the constituencies, like say in the US, like there are the states where they've legalized marijuana, but I don't think they've legalized other drugs, have they?
No, it's just marijuana at the moment. I think they're considering legalizing psychedelics as well. There's something that we really should be fully legal. So, psychedelics, definitely.
So, like, you could make an analogy that the same arguments in favor of legalizing gay marriage should work for legalizing polygamous or polyamorous marriage, but it's very unlikely. Well, maybe like you could say, well, the slippery slope will just take us there. But on the other hand, you could say the constituency for the latter two is much smaller than the constituency for the former. In the same way, like you've got a big constituency for the former, like you've got a lot of libertarians, a lot of right-leaning libertarians, and especially a lot of just lefties who like to smoke marijuana as well. And if they're all in the one spot, then like, yes, you're likely to get that. But like, it's just going to stop there. Like, they're not going to actually want to go the whole hog. They're not serious-minded enough to consider the arguments that you're making in favor of legalizing the harder drugs.
Yeah, but I think in the long run, you do take certain steps to move the law a certain way. I do think there's a significant gap between, like what you said, David, legalizing pot and then jumping on to, all right, now let's legalize harder stuff, because these drugs are so different from each other. And with pot, we know for a fact that at the very least, it's safer for you than existing legal drugs like tobacco and alcohol. So knowing that, it's almost a given that society is going to move towards legalizing it. But I think societies generally tend to have a more cautious attitude towards things like heroin and meth and such. So those drugs will have a harder uphill journey. But certainly, if there's a choice between getting someone on meth and getting them on heroin, and there's no other choice, you'd much rather have them on heroin, because at least from my understanding, it doesn't make people violent.
No, it doesn't. It just makes people
Personally, I'm in favor of selling opium to China, but that's a whole nother story.
That didn't work out so well last time, but if not, the first time, try again, right?
Well, that's only because China didn't want their population having a good time, like just Puritans.
They were worried it would destroy their hard work ethic.
That's right. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like we have to understand. Like, I'm always about the truth and the facts, and the fact is, the drug war has failed. It's failed. It is a 100% catastrophic failure.
Drugs are winning the war on drugs.
Drugs are winning the war on drugs.
Yep.
So, like, drugs are literally winning the war on drugs.
Yep.
And like, not only are drugs winning the war on drugs, but violent criminals are making profit out of it and making society more violent as a result. So it's like, you have to be more heavy-handed when you're dealing with these criminal gangs, so they have to be more heavy-handed in the way they deal with the police, and it's a bad feedback loop. So I think
again, like, if you're going to legalize drugs, it's got to go hand in hand with winning back the culture. Like, it can be because, like, in the same way that guns don't kill people, like, you could make a similar argument with drugs. Like, it's what we're seeing is part of the culture and part of that cultural decay, part of that disassociation that we have from our roots, and people are looking for other ways to find it. Like, I'm getting a bit,
well, that's the thing. It's like, the idea is, like, a lot of the arguments that people have come out with since the legalization, they're the classic, it's a gateway drug. Well, the gateway drug argument is bunk. I mean, every single drug addict started on milk, or pretty much all of them did anyway. Therefore, should we make milk illegal? I mean, it's a stupid argument. And the second thing, addiction is less to do with the drug itself. I mean, yeah, they get addicted to specific drugs, like they might be an alcoholic, or they might be addicted to heroin or ice or MDMA or whatever it is. But the drug is a symptom of another problem. It's a symptom of a lack of connection. So this is what the science says. The science says that drug addiction is more about having a poor childhood and not feeling connected with wider society. So it's actually a symptom of a wider problem within society, and that's that we're feeling more disconnected from each other, and there's less of a sense of community. Probably as Dave, I'm sure you would agree, is a lot of that has to do with multiculturalism and the fact that people aren't integrating and there's less trust, and we've got the cultural Marxism nonsense of dividing the family and all that kind of thing, and the lack of Christianity sort of dying, so we don't have the community there. So all these things are compounding to make drug addiction a lot worse. But it's not like you said. It's it's like the guns. No gun has ever killed anyone. No drug has ever killed anyone. What's killed someone is the person taking the drug, or impurities in the processing, which would be taken out of wouldn't be a factor anymore if drugs were legalized, because the content would be regulated, and if something went wrong, then you'd know who to sue. Like, there'd be a person that you could actually sue, rather than a drug dealer who's just going to run off and you're never going to find them again.
I don't think you can really make that link between multiculturalism and drug use, because even the most homogenous cultures in the world tend to have some horrible problems with drug addiction. Look at how bad opium is in Afghanistan.
It was a thing about the divisions within society. So I mean, it would be a longbow to say that multiculturalism was to blame for drug addiction. But it's in a myriad of factors, and I think a much bigger factor is the breakdown of the family unit. Actually, that's a much bigger problem, and it's all a symptom of this cultural Marxist rubbish, where they're trying to tell us that you can go out and sleep with 50 people until you're 30, and then you get married and have kids because biology doesn't matter all of a sudden. So Gary just mentioned, I worry about the psychosis, schizophrenic potential of marijuana. It's a legitimate concern. It is a legitimate concern. But the thing about psychosis on marijuana is it tends to only affect, it's not a violent psychosis like ice. It's a paranoid psychosis. It's a completely different one. It's a completely different kind of psychosis.
But see, if you legalize it, you can actually put a warning label that says, by the way, you might be predisposed to schizophrenia or all these attacks. Yeah, and then people who are going to do the drug anyway, because let's face it, even being illegal, it's fairly easy to get weed. They can at least go to their doctor, have a frank conversation. Am I predisposed to this? Am I able to take this drug? Can you test me? And they can do that. And you're saving their life by doing it. By keeping it illegal, you're not promoting responsible use. You're not promoting being cautious. You're making this taboo thing. It doesn't make a difference if you do 1 joint or 50 joints. And you create a less responsible and accountable society where these people get swept under the radar and develop their mental problems.
Yep. And another, that's a great point.
Would you guys support mandatory plain labeling, plain packaging on marijuana?
For marijuana?
No, it's failed for tobacco massively, and it will fail even worse for weed.
I'd want as colourful a branding as possible, and I want advertising constantly. I want marijuana advertising during the footy. I think that would go very, very well for some reason.
Oh, I do want some ad regulations. There should be a ban on using green color, on using the weed sign, and on using the picture of Bob Marley. This will promote actual originality, because I'm so sick of seeing that shit everywhere associated with weed.
That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah.
Imagine as soon as they legalize it, every ad comes out and there's a Bob Marley lookalike smoking a joint.
Yeah.
Another thing.
As a musician, if I have to listen to one more bloody bum 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 bum.
Offbeat.
I will lose it.
One thing I do want to bring up, because it's something that we need to talk about when it comes to ending drug prohibition, is psychedelics, especially psilocybin mushrooms. Now, psilocybin, there have been experiments done. I got this from Paul Stamets on his an amazing podcast that he did with Joe Rogan, which it was fantastic. I would recommend everyone go and watch Joe Rogan's podcast with Paul Stamets. It's one of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen. He talks about psilocybin mushrooms and psilocybin and the medicinal benefits of it. So there's 2 stories that he brings up. Oh, there's a lot more in it, so I'm not ruining it for you, but you really want to watch the whole thing. But these 2 stories, one of them is they did experiments on mice where they gave them brain damage. I think they gave them chemical brain damage some way or another, and they tested them. Yes, they had brain damage. So they took out a few control mice to test them. And then over the next few weeks, they gave them psilocybin. And over those few weeks, when they tested them again, the brain damage had been fully repaired. So the psilocybin in the mushrooms, like these magic mushrooms, psilocybin, had cured brain damage. And there's
Wow.
another one where there was this guy who was deaf, like he was completely deaf almost. He had a hearing aid and everything, went on a psilocybin trip, and he started hearing tap, 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 and he didn't know what it was. He's like hearing tap, 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 tap. And he turned around and he was actually hearing the ants on a post walking along a post, like on the veranda thing, like just walking along wood. He was hearing the feet of the ants. So this guy was legally deaf, and psilocybin made him hear so acutely that he could actually hear ants walking. So I mean, the medicinal benefits for things like psilocybin. I mean, you hear about stuff like that, and you wonder why is this illegal? And then there's the spiritual benefits and of things like LSD and DMT and you know, even taking these things, like people overwhelmingly report positive reactions to them, and when they have positive reactions to them, it lasts their entire life, and when they have a negative reaction, they tend to forget it quite quickly. This is what he was talking about in the talk. So I think once we legalize marijuana and people realize that it's actually not that bad, we should really be going for legalizing things like psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, and DMT and other psychedelics.
Jordan Peterson actually mentioned psilocybin.
Yeah,
in his talk when he was making the case for God, he actually mentioned that. He said that spiritual experiences can be recreated using psilocybin.
Yeah, they can, and DMT as well. And the amazing thing about it, also ayahuasca, like all these other psychedelics, the amazing thing about it is people tend to have similar experiences on the drugs, on the chemicals. So you have different people tend to have a very, very similar experience when they take the same drug, which is something that's really interesting. It's like, what is it about these substances that are making people have the exact same vision? Like people in DMT, for example, people on DMT, if you take enough of it, like I think I've never taken it before, but there's like two stages. You get into the airport, and then you're in the departure lounge, and then you're departing. So if you take enough, you can actually, people report going and seeing the entire universe, which I think is, and this is a common thing among people who take DMT. And it's like, that's just so, like, that's mind blowing. Like, what is it about DMT that does that? And I think, it would make people also, I think this is a big reason we'll say it might stay illegal for a while, is that it represents a big threat to the establishment, because if people start questioning everything, which is what happens when you take psychedelics, then it might not be a good thing for the status quo. So they'd be completely against it. But yeah, I'd love to see psychedelics legalized completely in my time, because I think it's something that would be of great benefit to society with very, very little downside.
There's one problem though. You see this happening already with ayahuasca and DMT. It started off as, this is an amazing thing that can open up the universe. And then suddenly you have all these really basic Instagram models and all these, horrible hipster freaks flying over to Mexico or, wherever it is, and just, doing a bunch of the stuff and, jumping on and putting deep quotes on the Instagram profile and just, bragging about it. I think, as much as I agree with you, actually completely, that should be legal and regulated.
Yeah,
I think I would weep to see something that's potentially that powerful, and this sounds very unlibertarian, uncapitalist even, but turned into a commodity, turned into this cheap thing that's just meaningless. It's a bit like how pornography cheapens love, for example, by taking a small bit of it and expanding it massively. It's a bit like that. Like, it would be a bit sad to see that happen, I think.
It might be. You make a fair point, and I think the answer to that would is hose be hose.
Yep, that's one thing we can never change. Horns cannot be regulated.
Change the culture.
Change the culture, exactly. Let's make we need to make being a hoe shameful again, because being a hoe, it ain't good, bro.
That's a good slogan. Being a hoe, it ain't good, bro. Yeah.
On that note, I think we've covered pretty much all the topics that we wanted to cover. I just wanted to say, just mention to anyone from South Africa who's watching the stream, that if you want to migrate to Australia, you need to go to the Australian Government Home Affairs website and you can apply for a skilled migrant visa, unless you're willing to come over here on a rickety boat and drop your password in the Indian Ocean. Password,
just say that you don't remember where you're from.
Yes. Hey, bro, I don't know where I'm from, bro. That's my worst South African accent.
I was like a cross between New Zealand and I don't know what else.
That's Scottish.
My horrendous. Oh, and by the way, for all the fans that have lasted all the way to the end, Tranny Madalena is on the way. I've written the video up, and Tranny Madalena is going to come and give us all some truth bombs. Oh, sorry, Satya wasn't here last week, so Satya doesn't understand what we're talking about. Though it's a very, very special treat that my most ardent fans have asked for.
Oh, is it going to be you dressed as a woman, Tranny Madalena?
Tranny Maddie, yeah, Tranny Maddie.
Oh, it's just going to be you with a wig. All right, fair enough.
It won't, no, you'll see. You'll see what it is. It's I don't know how much of my channel you've actually watched, but yeah, it's pretty much going to be me with a wig. And maybe a nice flowery dress. I haven't quite decided yet.
You're going to wear your Daisy Cousins costume.
I don't know what I find her attractive, but because she's very feminine, but at the same time, it's like,
Does she identify as a woman?
I don't know. I would imagine. I would imagine so.
Very much so. I
She's
know.
yeah. She's extremely. she's very intelligent and articulate kind of thing. But it's like I look at her and it's like, She's got a very squeaky voice. It's very high pitched and a bit shrill.
Oh, come on.
But she's lovely. Like she seems. I'm sure she's a lovely girl. I mean, you know her. I'm sure you can say that. And she always cakes herself in makeup. I mean, it doesn't look like she needs it either. I would imagine she'd be quite attractive without it. But
it'd be an improvement on the Hawthorn. It'd be an improvement on the Hawthorn cap.
The Hawthorn. The Hawthorn cap makes the face, I reckon. I don't know what happened in the footy this week, though, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, Melbourne haven't lost this week yet.
Sorry? Oh, Melbourne haven't lost yet, have they? They play tomorrow, don't they? Oh, yeah.
I hate Freud, but Jesus Christ, that was a Freudian slip. Oh, my God.
Melbourne haven't lost yet.
Yeah,
you didn't mean to say that. Oh. You didn't mean to say that Melbourne haven't lost yet. That's hilarious.
Oh, geez.
No, they haven't lost yet.
Jeez. Talk about like just losing all the attacking momentum on that one. Jeez.
Well, here's the thing, like you know how we're talking about the pressure in the game and how Melbourne's tackle count was way down.
Where was it against North Melbourne?
Where was it against? Exactly. We made 47 tackles for the whole game, and like, there's your game, guys. And the thing is, in the second half, they started really running for each other, and they started actually fighting for the ball and tackling hard and all that kind of thing. And North Melbourne sort of ran out of puff a little bit, and they shut down Ben Brown a little bit better, and they put more pressure on the midfield. It was all that there was a lack of pressure in the midfield, and so they just got absolutely ripped to shreds. And they changed it in the second half and started actually looking pretty good. They couldn't quite score in the final quarter, which was a bit annoying because they were definitely on top.
I was listening to it, yeah.
Yeah, they were definitely on top in the final quarter, but they couldn't capitalize. But it was that the first half was just pitiful. It was, and then everyone was like, "Oh, North Melbourne's playing fantastically," and I'm like, "Have you seen the fucking? Gosh, have you seen the tackle count? You honestly reckon that's North Melbourne playing well and not Hawthorn playing horrendously? No, that was Hawthorn playing horrendously." Absolutely.
What just gets me
like in the first half.
Melbourne beat North Melbourne. Hawthorn beat Melbourne. North Melbourne beat Hawthorn. It just goes round and round.
It doesn't. Here's the thing. I
still think it turns out.
I think Hawthorn is still a better side than North Melbourne. I think that first half was an aberration. I think the second half proves that first half was an aberration because it was like the second half was so much better in terms of pressure and run. That it just tells you that how bad that first half actually was.
And I think North Melbourne line up pretty well against Hawthorn though. They've got a pretty.
They do. They've done pretty well. We came close last time, and
guys,
he's calling it.
I assure you, this has nothing to do with me only watching real sports. But I gotta get going. I got stuff to finish up before bed.
We bought him with the footy talk. What do you mean by real sports, by the way?
We play this game up here called NRL, and it's a little more entertaining than a bunch of people, seagulls chasing around a chip, shaped like an egg.
You mean run at each other and hit each other in the face sport?
Well, yeah, real manly stuff like that. Exactly.
Yeah. That's real manly, getting smacked in the face repeatedly.
Well, yeah. Have you tried
run,
it?
Tackle, run,
Mm.
tackle, run, tackle, kick. Tackle, kick.
Scrum.
Run, tackle, kick.
Yeah, from
We can make a song about it. We can make a song about it. You get the ball 5 times, then we get the ball 5 times. 6 times, sorry. Maybe because I'm
they would have made it.
And which part this is an argument against it?
I don't mind NRL. I just find it completely dull and brainless. That's all.
I'm sure they feel the same way about you.
Anyway, that was a great conversation, guys. I think we'll end it. We've devolved into footy talk, so I don't apologise if you don't like footy. You might be a soy boy. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the. Although I actually found out that that's actually not true, by the way, the soy boy thing. But here's the thing: I'm still going to call people soy boys because that's not why it's funny. It's not funny because of soy. It's funny for the other reason, which is a video I'll probably make. I'll probably make soon because it needs to be said. Anyway, thanks again, chat. Thanks again, Satya, for being our guest.
Thanks for having me.
What was that discussion we were going to talk about? Well, you'll have to remind me.
Bill of Rights, I believe.
The Bill of Rights, actually, that's a good. I'll bring you on when we're going to talk about that because it's something worth talking about. David, I don't think I'm ever going to have you on ever again because you're a Melbourne supporter. And the chat, really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like. And as I'm sure you know, if you want to get notifications, you have to click the bell. And you might have to actually go and manually look at my content as well in case you're not getting notifications. Really appreciate everyone's support and all that kind of thing. Let's keep growing and don't forget to join us on Wednesday for the Anzac Day discussion. Well, hopefully we'll get this guest on. I'm really hoping we can get a former soldier as a guest. It would be absolutely fantastic. Otherwise, you'll just get me and Dave ranting at each other about how horrendous the other teams, the other football. Well, with Melbourne have played, so we might actually get to watch them play. Anyway, thanks guys. I'll see you around.
Cool. See you guys.
Happy team at Hawthorn.